My topic for today, dear friends, is faith as the basis of society. And this is really a continuation of my topic of last week, which was faith as the basis of morality in the human psyche. And just to say a few words from last week I spoke about how within the human condition, faith can be found in many, many venues, probably all of them. In science, it's a hypothesis, which lies as at the basis of all scientific discoveries. In geometry, it's the axioms, which are the self-evident truths, which lie at the basis of geometry. And in morality, it is the a priori self-evident truths of morality, which lie at the basis of our perception of good and evil. And so basically, faith is at the basis of human perception in general. Because of this, it is not surprising then that faith should also be at the basis of human society. One other word about faith and morality. Rabbi Kook, in one place, I think it's in our play, Tohar. So he says, if man is not able to understand God, then why does the Bible even have to tell us that there's a God? Why can't it just remain a secret? Why do we have to know it? It's an interesting question. I'm sort of paraphrasing the question. Because Rav Kook says, I'm paraphrasing it a little bit, because Rav Kook basically says, human beings can't really perceive God. There's no way for a finite mind to perceive the infinite. So why do we need to know that secret? The answer is because if we understand that secret correctly, it will train us to be moral beings. It will propel us in the way of the good. See, now of course you could say, because the way I like to put it is that the belief in the ultimate good propels us to do good. Now, of course, everything which is potent in life can be used for good or for evil. This was echoed already by Judah Levi in the 11th century, where he said that the idea that God can talk to human beings, what we call the prophets, is the basis of faith and of heresy at the same time. Yesod, it's shoresh ha'emunah v'shoresh ha'kfira. Because as we know, people can take potent things for the good and use them for evil. So you can use money to help promote society, to feed the hungry, to cure the sick, and you could use money to feed machines to destroy human beings. So, and to feed disinformation and whatever. So things that are powerful, they can be used for good or evil. It's called the tree of knowledge of good or evil. So things that are potent, they could be for the good or they could be for the bad. Science can be used to create exemplary medicines to cure people, and it can be used also to create vehicles of destruction. And the same thing really in belief. Belief is so basic to the human being that it can transform you into an angel. But the wrong beliefs, distorted beliefs, can also transform you into a satanic angel, which destroys. So things that are potent obviously need direction. But the fact that it can be used for the good is reason enough to keep it around, because that's what life is. We always have to choose the good and keep away from evil. If we had neither, we would be robots. So you can see I'm taking this seriously. I even wrote notes, which I normally don't do. So what about society? Now, it was Leibovich, Isaiah Leibovich, the professor of Hebrew, once when he was asked about democracy and the ideals of democracy. So he said, democracy is not an ideal, it's a necessity. It's a necessity how to run a state. That probably would be true if human beings were like robots who minded their own business, and then you just would have to have clerks running the country. But since people are faith-based, so is society. You know, it's, I guess, echoed in this statement. Leibovich was just really echoing a statement earlier on by thinkers before him. One of them a Jewish thinker, Don Isaac Barbanel, who when he talks about the Eitz Hadat Tovara, which is the tree of the knowledge of good and evil, in his commentary on Breshit, on Genesis, so it says, Eitz Hadat, this tree that can bring good and evil, this is politics. This is political leaders. They can bring good and evil. Actually, he calls it civilization. It's interesting what he meant by that. He says civilization, that brings good and evil. Of course, civilization would be all of mankind. But then he goes on, he describes his own life. And he says, now I'm living in the city of Venice. And that's a wonderful city because we only have local leadership. There's no national, federal leadership here at all. And you don't need it, he says. I worked in the courts of kings in Portugal, in Spain, and they are, he didn't say this exactly, but they're overrated. It's better not to have them, and that's why Venice is such a wonderful city. So yes, politics, of course, which is run by humans, and usually humans seeking power, can bring out the worst. As the expression goes, power corrupts, and absolute power corrupts absolutely. Echoing this, much, much later, of course, in the 20th century, you had Winston Churchill. And Churchill basically said that democracy is the worst form of government except for all the other forms of government, which means at least it works. At least it works. Now, this assumption of Churchill that democracy is at least something that works is the assumption that politicians, as I said before, are power hungry, and that democracy with its checks and balances is basically a vehicle to minimize the damage. So if you have a few hundred people sitting in the house and they're all looking at each other, so people will be nervous to do the wrong thing, and they'll try to do minimally. So in general, as somebody once said, good leadership is when they leave us alone, run the country, and do the minimal amount of damage and corruption. But there is more to it. In the 10th century, there was an Islamic philosopher by the name of Muhammad Abu Nasr al-Farabi. Farabi, which inspired Maimonides and Thomas Aquinas. In his book on the state, he says the state runs very much like the human body. Just like the heart runs the human body, so does the leadership run the state, which is true. But just like the human being, bad ideas will destroy you and good ideas will build you up. So bad leadership will destroy you and good leadership will build you up. So we can't just say that leadership is a vehicle to running the country, because people are not robots and people are looking for ideas and people listen to ideas and people will be influenced by ideas too. So the role of leadership is much more than, in that sense, than just running the country to make it work. And the leaders themselves know that. There are those who know to manipulate the people in order to get what they want. And on the occasion, you have those who also inspire. So I'd like to quote Rabbi Sachs once said, and we just commemorated the Shloshim for Rabbi Jonathan Sachs. So I want to quote him on two events. He said that Judaism believes not in the idea of power, but in the power of ideas. I'd like to add to that bad ideas will result in power for evil. So you need good leadership. Because it's true that we believe in the power of ideas, but there are bad ideas that can create very evil power in the world. And usually bad ideas are propelled by leaders who are pushing bad ideas and gaining power through this. So yes, I would actually say that the power of ideas is what actually stands behind the idea of power. In that sense, it's a total truism. And the question is what you do with it. And I'd like to quote him a second time now, also in connection with the idea of society. This was taken from a TED Talk, which was requoted at the Shloshim. And I'd like to, first of all, I thought it was a very powerful statement, but then it's also, even with powerful statements, we have to think about them and process them and understand them. So I'm trying to quote, it's not exact, but it's very close to it. Rabbi Sachs said in this TED Talk, he says, we as a collective have collective responsibility. He said, have you ever noticed how magical thinking has taken over our politics? They tell us, elect me, or elect him, or elect her, and they will solve all your problems. Says that is magical thinking. The far right and the far left. The far right dream of a golden age that never was. The far left dream of utopia, which never will be. And then you have the religious and the anti-religious, who are equally convinced that all it takes is either God or the absence of God to save us from ourselves. That too is magical thinking. For the one who can save us from ourselves is we the people, all of us together. This is the quote. I would like to continue this idea, which I think is a truism, but really more has to be said here. You see, people, whether for good or for bad, need good leadership to inspire them and to instill the desire to be good, to bring out the best of people, and to make it difficult for fake, power-hungry leaders to rise. This is a form of leader inspiration, leader which educates the people, which is possible. We have examples of this in history. Winston Churchill, in his famous talk on the radio, were told Great Britain that they could stand up to the Nazi machine and they didn't have to deal with Nazi aggression. They did not have to be intimidated. And if we go back in history, Moses, our great leader, who convinced the 2.5 tribes of Reuben, Gad, and the half of Manasseh to fight alongside with their brothers, even if they want to take land in Transjordan. And Joshua, later on, who brought all the 12 tribes together in Shechem and made them into one people, to feel the feeling of the one people, even without Sinai, but just by themselves. In Israel today, if I might diverse for a moment, and I think possibly worldwide, people are hungry for inspirational and relevant leadership. And I think they're a little bit fed up with politicians, especially in this country. Leadership doesn't have to come from the political sphere. I wrote an article maybe 2 months ago in the Jerusalem Post in their weekend edition that I said that basically the office, for instance, of the president of the country, the chief rabbi, are very important offices because they could theoretically be manned by people who try to inspire and unite the people. And they should be non-political offices, which would give much more weight to the value of their statements and direction. Because in general, the thinkers and the inspirers do not have to be from the political arena. The politicians are all in the news all the time. But to inspire people, leadership does not have to be a politician. It could be a rabbi, it could be an educator, a professor, a thinker, a mover, somebody who has the ability to talk to people, to understand them and help them understand themselves. You see, society needs to believe in itself, in its ability to transform itself into a relevant and sharing society, just like in every individual. So, just like in every individual, faith is the basis of our psyche and our morality, the same thing in society. The thinkers of society, which are the movers and the shakers in society, it's only a question of who the people decide who they are. Are they the politicians? Are they the scientists? Are they the rabbis? But it's sometimes the leaders themselves which can create this this direction. The truth is, they should all work together. If you remember in biblical Israel, on the one hand, you had the king who represented the politicians, and then you had the Sanhedrin, who represented the rabbis, the scholars, and the judiciary at the same time. And you had the prophet, the inspiring person, and these all worked together. And then you had the high priest, who represented, of course, the transcendent ideas. So these really should work together in order for society to happen. So since society is based on a belief system, because people are based on belief, it's the importance of shaping this belief for the good, which promotes a society and gives it the ability to transcend and progress and have international influence. It's bad leadership, of course, and egocentric leadership, which dwarfs a society and turns it into oblivion. But I want to end on a good note, and the good note is that good leadership is possible, and it can promote the health and the progression of our society. Shalom, shalom.